Chapter 32, The Conversation, Antony's POV. It didn't take Antony long to tidy the rooms, or to find and set out a jar of Julia's salve to soothe Hanya's welts when he returned. Looking at his living space, he was satisfied to see that no one would be able to tell that anything had ever happened. As soon as Antony had settled sufficiently to think straight, he went to his desk and pulled out the box with the enchanted papers. Sure enough, he had a letter from Claudia. The sight of her handwriting loosened all the knots of guilt and misery he was tied up in, and he settled in to read. My dear Antony. Already he felt more like himself. I eagerly await your arrival at Titus's coordinates. If they're out of humans, I'm inclined to say that's what they get for being savages. I hope you don't have to run any raids. I completely agree with your stance on capturing non-combatants. Anyhow, it's risky to have women of childbearing age aboard. We're hardly equipped to handle babies. As for what Marcus would think of you for that, he's welcome to build his own ship and run it how he pleases. That vessel is yours. Don't forget it. I'm surprised to hear so much about your new offering. Surprised, but not displeased. I'm glad you've gotten so much joy from him as well as exasperation. He sounds very sweet. Tell Hanyu hello from me, and that I expect him to take good care of my only twin. Antony would do no such thing. I know I don't have to tell you to be careful and remember that he's a human and won't live long, but I suppose I told you anyway. Forgive me my solicitousness, and please don't take it as condescension. As always, give Theo my love. We've had rough seas as of late, and I've been wishing terribly that she were here, not necessarily to steer the ship, but to cuddle up against when the wind gets so cold and wet I almost remember what it was like to shiver. Be well, Antony. I eagerly await your next letter. Your loving sister, Claudia. She was being ridiculous. Of course he wasn't getting overly attached. As she said herself, he knew better than to do that. It wasn't a crime to enjoy his offering. Everyone enjoyed their offerings. That was why they kept them in their rooms, instead of keeping them all in a dungeon and only visiting for meals. Anyhow, who wouldn't enjoy Hanyu? The cheerful idiot had tricked Marcus. Antony found himself amused by the idea of the two of them engaged in a conspiracy against his lover, though he still intended to scold Hanyu for the way he'd gone about it. Hanyu shouldn't risk himself by getting between Marcus and anything he wanted. Marcus was Antony's lover. It was Antony's job to handle him. Anyhow, unlike Hanyu, he could survive whatever Marcus dished out when his temper got the best of him. That was what made their relationship work. They could deal with each other. Marcus could handle Antony's manipulations, and Antony could handle Marcus's rages. It was the perfect pairing. Still, he was looking forward to Hanyu returning so he could patch him up and they could have a good laugh about it all. Anyway, he owed the boy some praise for his phenomenal acting skills. As if Antony had summoned him with a wish, Hanyu stepped through the door. He opened it and slipped through rather than barreling over the threshold like usual, and his head was bowed. Was he trying to hold back a laugh? Antony got up, smiling, and took a step towards his attendant, but in a few long-legged strides, Hanyu was right in front of him. The boy sank to the floor at his feet without even the quick grin he usually shot at Antony before he put his head down. Still, Antony didn't understand that something was wrong until Hanyu began speaking. Your unworthy slave looks forward to the remainder of your punishment, my lord. Please discipline me as I deserve. Oh dear. Remainder? Antony repeated stupidly, but already he was putting the pieces together. No, there will be no more punishment, Hanyu. We were just putting on a show to distract him from Asao. Wasn't that what you intended? Fuck, what if he'd been wrong? Had he misread that gleam in Hanyu's eye? What difference would it make if it had been an accident? None. Antony would have had to behave exactly the same. But still, panic set to work redoing every stomach knot his letter from Claudia had just loosened. It doesn't matter what I intended. Hanyu didn't budge from his bow. He wasn't even fidgeting, which was alarming all on its own. I still disobeyed you, my lord. I deserve any punishment it pleases you to give. Antony knelt carefully in front of his offering and finally gave in to his desire to stroke the boy's hair. Hanyu didn't quite break position, but he did lean into the gentle touch. Antony let out a breath he could have been holding for hours. How would he know? You've been punished plenty, he said. It's not your fault Marcus was being a pushy bastard. Though, if anything like that happens in the future, I don't want you to interfere again. I won't, Hanyu whispered into the carpet. Antony was fairly sure that the boy was crying. I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't realize that you wanted Asao. I thought... I didn't, Antony interrupted. I think I would have permitted it in the end because I didn't want my stubbornness to get your friend in trouble, but I didn't want it. Really? Hanyu quavered, and finally the boy was breaking position and peering up at Antony with his huge brown eyes, somehow scared and hopeful at the same time, under their generous veiling of tears and impossibly thick lashes. Antony felt something low in his stomach twist wretchedly at the sight, and he had to fight to keep from seizing the boy and dragging him into his lap to wipe those eyes dry. But you were so angry, Hanyu whispered, and Antony could have throttled himself. I was acting, Hanyu, he managed to say, around the panic squeezing his throat. Fuck, Antony, you fucking asshole, you idiot, you... I thought you were acting too, but were you really that scared? Oh, Hanyu said, which wasn't much of a response. Well, I feel stupid now. Acting, that makes sense. Of course it does. I'm so sorry for my hysterics, my lord. Well, there was his answer. Hanyu had been terrified, and Antony hadn't even fucking noticed. The shaking and tears had been real. Hanyu had been cowering under his hand, and he had thought it was all some kind of grand caper. He had thought they were co-conspirators, but he had actually been... Fuck, it didn't bear thinking about how he must have seemed to Hanyu in those moments. Antony had thought it was a game, albeit not one they had chosen or particularly enjoyed. For Hanyu, it had been a nightmare. It was terrible to realize that what he had experienced had matched so poorly with what Hanyu had experienced. More than terrible, it was sickening. Was this how Marcus felt whenever... No, this is what he was always trying to manipulate Marcus into feeling, this wretched squeezing guilt that made him want to kneel down and beg Hanyu's forgiveness. But where Hanyu deserved such contrition, he did not. Marcus knew that better than anyone. Antony dropped his hand from Hanyu's hair and gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, hoping that some of his sickening remorse would be conveyed in the gesture. It's not your fault you didn't realize. He cast about for something, anything, that he could have done differently so he could carry on reproaching himself more conveniently. Hanyu, I am so sorry. I should have whispered something or winked at you or something. Lord Marcus would have seen. Hanyu echoed Antony's own faltering thoughts. Really, it's for the best I got so frightened. It probably made everything much more convincing. I was going to compliment you on your own acting abilities. Antony groaned and drew his hand down over his face. I should have known. Oh, I'm a terrible actor, Hanyu said earnestly, swiping the tears off his cheeks. So it's for the best I didn't realize. Next time... No. Antony didn't have to work to make his voice commanding this time. Hanyu clearly caught the tone. His eyes flicked up curiously to meet Antony's, then he dropped his gaze, a picture of submission. Antony was glad. If he could make himself understood on no other point, he wanted to be understood in this. You're not going to do something like that again, he said. Not for any reason. Marcus isn't predictable or safe for you. I don't want you drawing his attention on purpose ever again. Understood? Understood, my lord, Hanyu whispered. The whole nature of our arrangement is that I'm supposed to protect you. That's what you get in exchange for your blood and obedience. Let me do that. It's not your job to throw yourself in the middle of our spats. His mind unhelpfully flashed an image of Hanyu actually physically throwing himself in Marcus's path. He remembered the man Marcus had pulled limb from limb at the raid. He thrust the thoughts away and fixed his gaze on Hanyu, letting some of his real, urgent pleading leak into his voice. I need you to understand this. When you started begging like that, you could have given him more ideas, and he would have kept using a sow as his bargaining chip. He could have started insisting that I use you both at once, or that you set to work on each other, or any number of things. You wouldn't want to get stuck choosing between servicing me or watching a sow get punished. Before Antony was even done speaking, he knew that he'd just made the latest in a seemingly endless parade of today's mistakes. Hanyu looked up again, and now his gaze was hungry and almost challenging. I would, the boy breathed, not moving his eyes from Antony's. I told you, my lord, I'm bad at acting. I was telling the truth when I interrupted a sow. I meant every word of what I said. It would be the greatest honor and pleasure of my life if you were to use me. It wouldn't. Had Antony ever switched from authoritative to desperate more quickly? I assure you, you would be disappointed. Disappointed? Hanyu sputtered, goggling at him. How could I ever... Well, anyhow, I'm sure I wouldn't be disappointed at all. He shifted a little, doubtless due to his welts, and Antony thanked any actual gods that might be listening for the distraction. You're not in any kind of shape for anything anyway. Come on, I've got salve for your welts. It'll reduce the stinging and help you heal faster. I don't mind. The boy was still looking at him with his cheeks flushed and his eyes molten. I'm happy to wear my master's marks. Fuck. The words and look went straight to Antony's groin. He had just come twice with Marcus. Damn this immortal stamina. Don't be ridiculous. He hoped his voice didn't give away his body's sudden traitorous interest. Even if it had been a real punishment, I would have given you the solve afterwards. Really? Hanyu looked at him curiously. Would you have still caned me like that? If you had meant it, I mean? Not exactly. Antony glared at the table as if it had been to blame. I would have warmed you up with my hand first so it didn't hurt so much. Hanyu gave a half-strangled groan at that, and Antony finally dared to scowl directly at him. It seemed that the boy wasn't planning to burst into tears again anytime soon. I do that every time I have to punish a human, he said, tone quelling. I'm not interested in damaging anybody. Where's this coming from? You were just crying, and I imagine you've been miserable all day, and now you're, what, overcome with lust? I suppose? Hanyu looked a little helpless as he shrugged. Now that I know you weren't spanking me because you were angry, I find it rather erotic? Oh, Antony cleared his unobstructed throat. He had thought that Hanyu's erection had simply been due to the increased flow of blood to his lower regions that the punishment entailed. He hadn't thought it had been a sign of real arousal. Damn, now he felt guilty for picking at the boy. Hanyu hadn't had centuries to figure out his kinks and desires, after all. Well, that's perfectly normal. He hoped his tone was comforting as well as businesslike. You'll find any number of lovers who would be happy to explore that with you. Now, come on, I need to tend to you. Take that robe off and go lie down on the bed, on your stomach. Hanyu stood and threw a lascivious glance at him. Antony rolled his eyes. Do you want to apply it yourself? You can, but it'll be harder to reach. I'm sorry, my lord, I'll stop. Now the boy just looked chastened and miserable again. It wasn't an improvement. Hanyu stood as well and grabbed the salve, then followed Hanyu into the bedroom and watched as the boy shucked off his robe and laid down. He winced at the state of Hanyu's welts. Fuck, Hanyu! Why didn't you wear any underthings? Didn't it hurt? Yes, my lord, it did. His voice was meek and despondent. Antony cursed himself for being so blunt. Either I'm being nasty and manipulative without even realizing it, or I'm stomping around accidentally trampling on everyone's feelings. When will I learn how to do things on purpose? Maybe Felix would give me lessons on how to be less terrible. All right, Antony said. Well, this'll sting. I'm sorry. He set to work. Hanyu lay still, and he didn't make any noise, though Antony knew he must be uncomfortable at least. The flesh of his ass was striped hot and red under Antony's fingers as he spread the salve. He was relieved to see that, as he thought, he hadn't accidentally overlapped any of his strikes. He was also relieved to find that the task didn't further inflame his own sudden, inappropriate flash of interest in the boy. He just wanted to soothe the poor abused skin. The trouble was the red. It made him think of blood, Hanyu's blood especially, flowing hot and fresh and so very, very good, right under his fingers. It sent a great squeezing hunger pain through his belly. He'd already been so hungry when he caught Hanyu snooping yesterday, and then he'd only had the tiniest sip, barely enough to taste, and after all the energy he'd expended with Marcus that afternoon, he was dying for a proper meal. Still, Hanyu had been stressed and crying. The last time he'd drunk after his offering was in that state, Hanyu had swooned, and Antony had been too guilty and terrified to take a sip since. But he had to eat sooner or later. Tomorrow. He promised himself he would drink when they woke up. Right now, he needed to tend to his offering's feelings as well as his flesh. He couldn't think of anything he'd be less skilled at doing, but Hanyu's unhappy silence naggled at him. I'm not trying to be cruel about turning you down, Hanyu, I swear, he said finally. I'm just very tired. You're not cruel. Hanyu's voice was a little muffled by the pillow he had buried his face in. You're wonderful, and I'm stupid and demanding and can't seem to remember my place. You're none of those things. Antony scooped out another generous helping of salve and dabbled it over the worst of the welts. You are amazingly quick thinking today. You have never once been demanding with me. It was harder to argue the last one, but what was he supposed to say? Yes, you don't always remember your place, but I like that about you. I never got the chance to say how much I enjoyed your reading, Antony said instead. You are right. You're wonderful at it. When you're not lobbing the damn book at my face anyhow. Antony turned his head so he could peer up at Antony from one eye, and the boy was finally smiling again. Antony felt his whole body relax at the sight. Sorry about that, Hanyu said, and Antony snorted. You are not. You are laughing. The smile widened, and to his own horror, Antony found himself raising his voice in exaggerated offense to try to coax it wider yet. What was he doing? Was he really clowning for his attendant? "My own offering, laughing at my misfortunes," he wailed. "How cruel the world has become in my old age." Hanyu was laughing now, and Antony felt so pleased and foolish at the accomplishment that he knew he needed to go to sleep before he started saying or doing or feeling anything he would regret later. He crawled off the bed and replaced the lid on the jar of salve. "All right, go put on some underthings," he told Hanyu. "Then do what pleases you. I'm going to bed." Antony donned his own nightclothes and slid under the covers. Immediately he was struck with the memory of the afternoon's tumble with Marcus on his bed, and the way he'd ruined it all. He kept replaying it in his mind, trying to think what he should have said or done instead. What would have kept that sweet smile on his lover's face? Why did he always have to ruin everything and make Marcus so angry? What was wrong with him? Why did he— "My lord?" Hanyu's timid voice interrupted Antony's self-recriminations. The boy was standing next to his cot, hair tumbling loose and face hopeful and fearful in equal measures. Antony was afraid that he knew what his offering was about to ask. "Please don't say it. I don't have the strength right now to turn you down." "May I sleep in your bed?" Hanyu asked. He dropped his pleading eyes submissively to where his hands were twisting and untwisting. "I promise I won't try anything, my lord. I just want to be close to you. Please?" "Damn it. Oh, don't look at me like I'm about to step on your supper. All right." Antony scowled at the rapturous grin that overtook the boy's face. Would the skin at the corners of his mouth split if his smile got any bigger? It seemed likely. "Bring your own pillow, and if you snore, you should know that I'm liable to kick you right out of the bed. Literally. You'll fly halfway across the room." "Thank you, thank you, thank you," Hanyu rhapsodized. He dove under the covers and pulled Antony against his nearly naked body for a tight hug, ignoring the squawk of protest that followed. "I'll be good, my lord. I promise. I won't make a sound all night." Right, sure. That was likely. Antony gave up on squirming free of the boy's clasping limbs. In the first place, twisting around drew a faint twinge of pain from his almost healed rib, and rather more pressingly, hunger made it difficult to accurately gauge his strength. He couldn't risk hurting the big idiot. Hanyu's snapped bones would not heal in 24 hours. Anyhow, it wasn't entirely unpleasant to be cradled against Hanyu's broad chest, even if his heartbeat made Antony's stomach gape emptily inside of him. Damn, the boy was so warm. Were all humans this warm? He didn't remember if— Well, no good thinking about that. Antony went limp and accepted his fate. The boy cuddled even closer and whispered a blissful, "Thank you. Good night, Antony." Oh, Hanyu was using his name again. That was fine. That was acceptable. Nothing to get excited about. But fine. Antony scowled harder, but he was fairly sure that Hanyu wouldn't see it with the way he was snuggled against his back. Right. Well, good night, Hanyu.